Right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another special guest Saturday. With me, I have my good friend Ethan Skirving. How are you doing, sir?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
That's very good. I'm also well, thank you.
Very good.
So, you are. Oh, sorry, I've just got a message through on Facebook. I don't know if that thing will have come through. Right. Um, shall we bother restarting?
No, just keep going. Keep the authenticity.
Indeed. One take. We'll do it live. Right. So, my first question for you, because I know that you play a very large range of music, much like Ewan does, um, but it's sort of more towards the brass and orchestral side of things you played in youth orchestras. So just give us a sort of flavour of the types of music that you play.
Well, mainly nowadays I stick, as you say, I stick with banding. I play a lot of orchestral percussion,
Yeah.
orchestras, brass bands, concert band, etc. One or two of which I conduct as well. So I lose one of my sticks and do some waving around. But I'm still quite involved in big band playing. I keep my drum set skills up to par as well.
Yeah.
That's my main instrument. So I'd say I probably keep as involved with big band jazz as I do with my more classical playing, and anything else in between that I can fit in, really.
Yeah, fantastic. So you've been playing drums for how long now?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. I began when I was 8, I think. I was 8
Wow,
when I started, so that would
13
be
years.
coming up 13 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, goodness me. And over that time, obviously, I mean, they say it takes either 10,000 hours or 10 years thereabouts to master an instrument. And I would say, I mean, from playing with you myself, you are quite a master of percussion. But you also foray um, into bass, and you even play a bit of brass.
I
So
do, as is
yeah,
the tale for many people during lockdown and getting very, very bored. I've
of course,
decided to brush up on my tuba skills to further
yes,
involve myself in the brass band world.
yes, indeed, nothing like a good bass instrument, as we
No.
all know. Um, so with that being said, what's your favorite sort of song to play and perform um, within a band setting? What's your favorite sort of
I don't know
tune?
because that's the reason why I enjoy the music that I play is the
Yeah,
variety.
yeah,
There's very I hate questions like this. I'm
yeah.
very
You
rarely
can't pick a favorite, I know.
have favorites of things. It depends. As a percussionist, I would say um, most either sort of test piece competition styles or things like concert openers or Latin music because that's where
Yeah,
actually being a percussionist you start to come to the fore a little bit and you can do a bit more than playing a snare drum and a cymbal per se in a march or something.
yeah,
Um, but then if I was going to whack myself on tuba in a band, then I'd prefer the sort of slower, more reflective music where you
yeah.
could just sit at the bottom of a chord playing some low foundational tones and really make the stage rumble when you want to.
Oh yeah. What's that song called? Is it Cloud Mountain? A really slow sort of brass piece. What's it called? I'm sure it's got the word cloud in it somewhere.
Is this something I've played before, or is this?
I think it's something I've seen you perform before.
I'm trying to think.
No, it was one of the songs that you performed in the church. Mind you, that's going back what 5 or 6 years now.
Indeed. In terms of solo music, I don't think we played anything too slow or too reflective there. We'd played some bigger, slower, grander pieces. We'd done things like the theme from 1492, Conquest of Paradise, etc.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, very good. So, where's your favorite place that you've performed with either youth orchestra or big band, brass band?
Again, that depends on what kind of place you're asking about. If you're talking about the sort of bigger venues where it's a bit more flashy to play, where you can have a bigger audience and things, um, I quite enjoy playing at Sage Gateshead. Not somewhere I played for a while, but especially during being at school. That's
Yeah,
probably that's like the local big concert hall that we have. That's the northeast sort of grandioso of where to
yeah,
play. Um, and I played there. Was lucky enough to play there a fair few times, so that holds quite close to home.
Yeah,
But then on the other scale of things, I actually quite enjoy the smaller side of playing in
yeah,
the local community and playing smaller, more intimate jazz gigs like you and me have done before.
indeed.
So playing in the local areas, like when we do what was it? The first gin and jazz we did. What was the place called? Not the second one, the Michael Bublé
Was
one.
it
The first one.
Parish Hall? I think it was the local scouts group, Parish Hall.
Yes,
Just
that
really
kind
small venue.
that kind of small sort of jazz venue. Like you imagine if you imagine going to see a swing set in the 40s or something,
Yeah,
people sat around 4 or 5 people to a small round table having a drink while a small jazz band plays at the front. I also enjoy that kind of venue.
yeah, definitely. And it was especially good with having the micro band. Obviously, it wasn't the full brass band. It was just the sort of select best musicians, and that was my obviously my first experience with actually playing with that big band live.
What's your first gig? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, God, that was a special experience, I've got to say. Um, so, which musician would you most like to meet? Um, living or dead? Same as last time.
Oh, I don't know. Um, there are a couple of the old classical composers that I think would be interesting to meet. Not to tread on Ewan's toes, but Beethoven would be one of them. He's the obvious choice, just because he bridged the gap in between the classical and the romantic, and he changed quite a lot of classical music. It'd be interesting to just hear his thoughts behind what he did. Who else? John Williams.
John Williams.
John Williams.
What sort of music scene's he from?
Um, well, the film music scene.
Yeah, from scoring.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Classical music, but on a bigger scale and sort of with a slightly more modern twist to it. So it's not completely avant-garde with random dissonance everywhere and things like that, but it's not as prim and proper and sort of mechanical as the classical music can be.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. And some of the themes he comes up with, his Harry Potter scores, etc., his Star Wars scores and everything are absolutely fantastic. And I'd love to meet him and discuss with him some of the things that he's done. And then actual playing musicians wise, there's various drummers that I'd love to have a chat to at some point. Tommy Igoe being one of them.
Yeah.
He has a lot to say about drumming, and he's an absolutely top class drummer himself. But there's a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. Because of course there's so many different worlds of music. Especially that, both you and I are interested in that, it's kind of hard to get one musician that can just tell you about all the different sorts that you take an interest in. But yeah, speaking about film scoring, is that something that you'd maybe want to go into in the future?
Definitely. Well, I enjoy writing music myself.
Yeah.
But one thing I sometimes lack is I enjoy sitting down and coming up with ideas, but one thing I lack is the sort of creative reason for why I'm doing it. Whereas
Yeah.
I quite enjoy. I imagine the context of being a film musician scorer is you're given the mood that you have to write for, you're given the scene, you're given the character, and therefore you have your brief upon which to base your idea. And I think I'd really, really enjoy that.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that we've talked about that you have performed in some very interesting places. But where would you most like to perform in the future? If you could pick any sort of dream venue, where would that be?
I don't know, because it comes down to there's plenty of big venues that are very similar in terms of the grand scale to play in, but it's more the event.
Yeah, the atmosphere.
So like I've played at I've been lucky enough to play in the Royal Albert Hall before, which was quite a special experience. But that was for a sort of youth festival concert. I'd love to play at that venue in the context of maybe playing in the Proms or something like that.
Yeah.
Or playing in a professional setting or somewhere like that. Carnegie Hall is one that I'd like to play in someday.
Yeah.
That's a very, very popular venue in America.
Yeah.
There's absolutely loads. In terms of one thing I would like to do is play in more of the venues that we have in and around us. In the local live scene in and around Stockton, etc. Because it's a lot bigger than the live music scene in Stockton is bigger than you think it is. And and I'm not sure I've really quite experienced enough of it yet. I want to go out and experience some of what we have as local venues around us.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, the one thing that I'm quite disappointed that we don't have around us is things like jazz bars. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, they're a thing from the 1920s, most people would think, but it'd be nice to sort of bring them back in the 2020s and have, musicians such as yourself come in and play that type of music. And obviously, you've got bigger venues like the Arc, which could support things like a brass concert. Um,
the Ark's a good venue.
yeah, you played there a couple of times, have you?
Just the twice, I think. I've forgotten about both of those actually. Those are both again very lucky experiences. That was in the big bands before you joined. I think this was
Oh,
maybe
well,
year 8, year 9, year 10.
yeah.
Two of the sort of more they're not like traditional brass bands. Sort of the modern pop brass. So you've heard of the Hot 8 brass band?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we supported them at the Arc in
Right.
that I was about 13 when we did that. That was fantastic. And then we did a similar thing 2 years later, Hackney Colliery Band, a very similar style of music, and we supported them as well. But that's a nice venue. It's not absolutely massive, but it's big enough to feel like a concert venue. It's got that good mid-sized feel to it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's got the best of sort of both worlds where it's not too sort of grandiose, so you feel that it's, a bit of an austere event, but it's just sort of, you know, that good intimate big concert feel. But yeah, um, those were all the questions that I had for you.
Very good.
So, is there anything else that you want to add? Anything you'd like to mention?
Um, I don't know, unless there's anything, unless you want to have just a general chat about some of the things we've seen and done in our musical time, and some of the
Indeed,
things we've done, and some of the things we've done together.
we certainly can. So,
Be good to reminisce, seeing as we can't do many of those things at the minute, except for our home recording projects, which is
indeed,
we have our next one in the pipeline.
indeed, coming out on Monday. So watch out for that, guys.
Yes, indeed.
Um, yes, fantastic display of how not to sing, but how to mix and master a song, um, and also how to play a cracking keyboard solo. But all of that is to come. Um, so yeah, how do you actually find it? This sort of coordinating music when it's at a distance like this, like when we're having to sort of coordinate parts when we can't actually play together. Like, how do you find that?
Difficult, because it's very bitty, as opposed to being what you'd ideally have, which is what we always used to do. You sat in the same room, so that
Yeah,
if one of you feels like you should slightly change something about what we're playing, you just point it out and say, "Oh, let's try this," and within 10 seconds you've tried it and you know if it works or not, as opposed to having
yeah,
to send each other clips of an idea at a time and
yeah,
then say yes or no and send it back and forth, or when your video decides not to play or not to work, so you can't even take the clips in the first place.
yeah,
um, but it's better than nothing while we're sat at home, and so it's interesting and it's different to then collect everything and put it together at the end, and it teaches you new skills such as things like video editing,
precisely.
which I could not do before until I gave it a go to put some stuff together while we've been in lockdown.
Yeah, yeah. What is it? It's DaVinci Resolve that you use?
DaVinci Resolve, yeah, fantastic piece of software.
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, I must say I've tried to have a little mess about in it myself, and quite. It's easy enough to work with, um, but to actually get anything for me to get anything that sounds half decent, because in terms of recording all the instruments, I mean, obviously I can't play drums to save my life, um, but how do you sort of record the bass instruments? Because trying to record those through a phone camera, that's incredibly difficult. Do you just sort of plug them straight in? Is there a way to do that?
Well, normally what you have is, well, I'll show you. So normally you've got to get, if I'm just doing it straight, I shall plug it into this,
Oh,
an audio interface, which basically just bridges the gap between an audio signal and your computer, because you can't just sort of plug it in, it has to know what to do with the signal.
yeah,
And there's a few, for bass instruments, there's a few different ways you either plug it straight in and sort of use a virtual amp in the computer to make it sound decent, or what I'd preferably try and do is plug it into my amp, get that sounding good, and then you just run a wire from the amp into the interface into the computer.
Oh,
Or you can put a microphone in front of the amp as well, just achieve a similar thing, or a
yeah.
combination of both.
Hmm, that's yeah, interesting. Um, so in terms of like a setup when you're recording, do you tend to have one part, like you just do one part, maybe the drums, and then do you go straight to another, or do you usually leave a bit of a gap in between recording? Like, do you sort of get the ideas through? Because when it came to Carpe Diem, I obviously didn't give you much direction besides just the chords in which to go, like with the bass, but yet you still came up with, some fantastic bass lines and drums for it. Um, so do you sort of leave a bit of time in between, or do you just sort of spontaneously do all the instruments on the fly?
Combination of both. What I
Yeah.
tend to do is not record anything for a little while, just play all the
Mm.
instruments that I think I'm going to use to add to the music, come up with the
Yeah.
ideas, and then try and write it down. Because also, what that has the benefit of doing is using software to write it down, then makes you a sort of makeshift backing track that you can then just play along to. So you have that backing track, and then once I have all my ideas down and written down and solidified, then I can just go through and record part after part and slowly add them together.
Yeah. So just slowly compounding it over like maybe a period of a few days. That's usually how it goes.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Going back to your questions, actually, I'm interested to know what your favorite place is that you've played in, because you, as you don't mention, you fail to mention very often to your viewers, is that you are a quite a high level musician yourself, and you've played in a number of the same venues that I have.
Well, it's not quite Albert Hall level, but definitely I'd say one of my favourite places was the Sage, or Sage Gateshead rather. It's not called the Sage, is it?
No, it's not.
Um, I often forget that. That's a classic misnomer. Um, but yeah, I'd definitely say Sage Gateshead um, was probably the grandest source of the most adrenaline rush I got. But um, where did we play Bubbly and Boobley?
That
That
was in
was
Ewan's Village,
Yeah, it was in Worsel Village Hall, wasn't it?
Worcester Village, yeah.
That, in terms of like the atmosphere, because I must admit, I did get quite drunk, and then we hijacked the concert afterwards. The guitarist Harry, fantastic lad, he decided that as an encore, we were going to do 500 Miles by the Proclaimers. Just basically, told us all the chords, told us what to play, and after everyone, after our band leader had said that the concert was over, everyone was like, "Oh, encore!" Harry goes down, gets the mic, starts chugging out that E chord on his guitar, and off we went. So that was a fantastic gig.
Yeah.
Very funny. Yeah. I haven't really performed anywhere abroad, but you've performed in Italy, haven't you? How
Yes.
was that? That sort of the atmosphere of, because I know that obviously the Italians do like their jazz and they like their, sort of Latin grooves. So did you perform much of that over there? Was it with big band that you went?
It was big band, yeah. We did. Actually, we didn't do a very lot of Latin music. We stuck
Yeah,
to sort of a lot of more traditional jazz. But no, that was another interesting one. Just played at a couple of different venues. Again, they were sort of part of like youth music events and things like that. So it was a good mix
yeah,
of people,
yeah,
people there watching. No, that was a good time.
yeah. That's very good. But yeah, no, I must say that I really can't wait to get back into playing with a proper band because that's one thing that obviously a lot of musicians, even if they can sort of entertain themselves alone, if they've been used to that, togetherness of a band, it can be quite a lonely time when you're just trying to make music, especially at a distance. It's never the same as live music.
There's nothing like I'm a firm believer that music should be felt, and
Yeah,
so unless you know go into an orchestral and band context and big band context, etc. There's you can play along to recordings, you can make videos and stuff, but nothing's beats the physical sound that you feel when 20 or 30
Yeah.
people actually play music in a room.
Mhm. Especially when that bass comes through. Oh, because headphones a lot of the time do not do tubas or bass trombones justice. Um, yeah, hearing those live is incredible, especially in a place that has good acoustics like a church, for
Yeah.
example. Yeah, just absolutely brilliant. Um, what was I going to say? I had a question, but it's just evaporated. Um, that was it. When did you learn to play piano? Sort of around what age was that? Because piano does class as percussion, doesn't it? It falls into the same sort of.
Depends who you ask.
Yeah,
It does have strings. Uh,
yeah.
I don't stray into that argument very much.
Mm.
I still wouldn't say that I can play it. I describe what I do as faking my way through it in that I can wangle some chords in the background, but if you ask me to sit down and play some music, I will struggle very, very badly.
Yeah.
But that's just sort of I've picked it up over a very, very long. My mom's a pianist.
Oh, right.
Therefore, that's why we have she's the piano player in the family. That's why we have a
Yeah.
piano in the house. So over 10 years of plinking away on some notes, I've eventually learned how to play maybe three or four notes at the same time, and therefore can play some chords and some music.
Yeah. So, and that's a really good way. That's kind of how I learned guitar was just having the instrument there,
Yeah.
and just taking an interest in it, going over, and just having a try. I think that's how. Um, I mean, my granddad was the only musical person in the family, um, and so it was only sort of after I inherited his guitars that I then took it a bit more seriously and started to properly practice. But yeah, it's definitely handy having musical people in the family
Mhm.
so that you can foray into different instruments.
Or in your case of playing the bass, you can audition to join the band on an instrument that you've played maybe twice or three times before in your life, and then learn how to play it.
Well,
And
yeah,
that,
yeah, that
and that
was
you
a
did very well.
well, thank you. That was a classic case of faking it till I make it. That's another thing where are you were saying that you can just sort of if someone said play that music, I probably couldn't just sight read. I mean, I still can't actually read sheet music, which is something I should really learn how to do now that I'm getting into brass because there's no tabs for brass.
No.
Um, but yes, it's it's something that I didn't ever think I'd get into, but which, thanks to you, I did get into playing the bass. And when I'm able to record, when we're able to get into the studio together and record it, then I'll hopefully be able to show off what I've learned over these past. How long has it been since Big Band? 4 years.
Nearly three. It was
God,
2018 when you think the last summer.
2018. Yeah, the last time. Yeah, God, that the past 3 years has just felt like an absolute jumble. The timelines are all mixed up. Um, but yes, again, I had another question, but it's gone. Um, that was it. So at university, I know that you're studying physics, and there is the side of physics that looks into acoustics and music and that sort of thing. Do you think that that'll be useful going forwards? Like, do you think that it's useful for a musician to know how the sort of deeper theory of sound works, um, like in the context of maybe composing or coming up with?
Um, it's definitely useful. Well, there's the two senses. There's in the sense of composing, where there's loads of people that try to prove sort of mathematical relationships between writing music and musical lines and think.
Yeah.
Um, I'm more interested in the actual physical science of sound. So things
Mm.
like um, why things end up being in tune, why different places sound better than others to play in, why different pieces of equipment are better than others, etc., because of the way they sound.
Hmm.
So it's used. I prefer the sort of more technical aspect of designing things to sound good.
Yeah,
That kind of aspect.
yeah. So the sort of more material and like the geometry properties of something that make it sound good. Like, well, I guess the term for that would be the acoustics. Yeah, the acoustic sciences.
Mm.
Speaking of, I really should get a proper dreadnought body guitar because apparently they have a fuller sound than the cutaways. Although I don't know how much the shape of an acoustic guitar actually affects the sound because you get all sorts of shapes with like round backs or flat
Mm.
backs.
Well, it depends on the sound you want, I suppose.
Yeah,
So a lot of classical guitars will won't have the cutaway shape in them
yeah,
because they want to get more of the lower and mid tones out. While they use nylon strings instead of metal as well.
yeah.
Whereas your guitar is for things like folk and country, where you want the bright steel string sound, and that cutaway sort of accentuates the higher frequencies of things.
Ah,
And
well,
I'm
there you
actually,
go. Yeah.
I could well be speaking absolute gibberish, but
Oh,
uh,
gosh. It
it's my
makes
guess.
sense if you think about it, that with it having sort of maybe a smaller hollow in it instead of just being one large interior surface. Yeah, that would be quite interesting to actually look into. Who knows? Um, but yes, you do play a little bit of guitar as well.
Again, in a very similar way to how I play piano,
Yeah,
I know three or four chords that can pass in a simple musical setting, but I can't play properly. I couldn't play lead. My fingers aren't. I don't have the dexterity for that. I can get away with playing one note at a time on a bass, and that's about it.
yeah. Well, if you ever want to learn, we can exchange some teachings. Because a while ago, I did actually buy a drum set. I think you drove me to go and get it. That was back when I still couldn't drive. Um,
Yes, indeed.
which shows how long ago it was. But yeah, and that's just been sat at my grandma's gathering dust. I really should
Mm.
actually try to learn it properly.
That was about 3 or 4 months before we whizzed down the M1 to collect our shared bass
Yeah,
guitar from Bradford.
the five string. Oh, yes, our son, which we have the sort of shared custody arrangements of where whilst you're at uni, you might have it for a term, and then I'll have it for a bit, and then. But yeah, it's something that I also really should play more when I actually have it. Because as soon as I sort of receive it, I just hang it up and I go, right, I'm going to practice on that tomorrow, and then I don't make enough time because there's only the one song that I can actually play on it that properly utilizes the lower B string, which is Michael Camillo's "Not Yet," which absolute cracking tune. If you
The,
guys out there haven't heard it,
the entire album is cracking. It's a
yeah,
live album, but you wouldn't think it. It sounds like it's studio recorded.
that what's the album called again?
Caribe.
And that's this. Oh, and the song "Caribe" is the one with the incredible piano solo.
Yes.
Ah, that's live.
The entire you can find the
Oh,
videos of
album's
it
live.
on YouTube.
Crikey.
The whole album's live, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That just shows how good live music can be. Um, and that's another thing about live music as well, is the fact that when you've got a group of really good musicians, you can make it sound so tight and together, um, which obviously can be quite tricky when you're doing things sort of at a distance. But yeah. What's the bass guitarist's name?
Anthony Jackson.
Anthony Jackson. That's him. He's a good person to check out for you lot out there if you want to see an absolute monster on the bass. He doesn't have a five string, he has a six string. And the way that his fingers go over those strings, you just think that they were, tiny little guitar strings. He is just, yeah, incredible. Who's your sort of inspiration for the instruments that you play?
Um, I don't know. Some of the later ones, um, most of my inspiration comes from the sound that they make, and I
Yes.
choose the instruments. In terms of getting good at being a jazz, playing drums is my primary instrument. In
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
of getting good at being a jazz drummer,
Mm,
you'd probably have to look at the obvious of watching people like Buddy Rich play is
yeah.
astounding. There's just something about watching him play that you think is stupidly good. Tommy
Yeah.
Igoe as well excels
Yeah.
in jazz and a load of other varieties as well. It's wanting to be like them. Bass playing
Yeah.
wise, Anthony Jackson would be an obvious one.
Mm,
Um, Other lines. Oh, who did? Who's the one who's famous for the chicken? Jaco Pastorius.
yeah.
His sound as well. It's just wanting to make the same sound they do because they have their own sound. Obviously,
Yeah.
I know you're a fan of as am I to be fair, Joe Dart of Wolfpack.
Yeah. Joe Dart.
His sound is something that I aimed for on our most recent project.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes,
but then
indeed.
all the other instruments like playing tuba is A for a laugh and B, but just because of the sound it can make and it's having a bit of fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the perfect things about music is that you've got that option to either, you know, get serious with it and take it far with certain instruments, but then just have fun with other instruments, much like myself with the trombone. Um, just thought I needed a bit of change of speed,
Yes.
but who knows? Who knows where I'll be in a year with it? Probably with it in a case, sat crying because I didn't practice enough. But yeah, indeed. Um, right. Bloody hell, it's been over half an hour. This has been a fantastic call. So
Very
I
good.
think what we will do is we will leave it there because my brain cannot come up with any more interesting questions.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for having me on.
And thank you very much for coming on. It
No
was an
problem.
absolute pleasure.
Hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Indeed, I'm sure we shall. Once we've got some more experiences to share, we shall. We'll talk about them. Excellent. Right. Well, goodbye for now.
Farewell.